The scorching iron kissed her flesh with a searing finality that made Willow Reed scream into the gag they'd stuffed between her teeth. Through tears that blurred the dusty ranch yard, she saw him standing there, Zachary Xavier, watching with a storm brewing in his eyes, his hand hovering dangerously close to the revolver at his hip. The tall cowboy's face, normally as unreadable as a poker player's, cracked with something she'd never seen before: pure, undiluted fury. Willow collapsed to her knees in the dirt as the brand smoldered on her shoulder, the unmistakable mark of the Circle M ranch still smoking. The smell of her own burned flesh made her stomach heave. A man's laughter cut through the New Mexico territory heat. Marcus Holloway, her so-called owner, admiring his handiwork. "There," Holloway said, tossing the branding iron aside. "Now everyone'll know who you belong to if you try running again." The pain was blinding, radiating through her body in waves that threatened to pull her under. But through the haze, she heard boots crunching on gravel, coming closer. "That's enough." Zachary's voice was low, dangerous. "Mind your business, Xavier. This woman's my property, fair and square." "Not anymore." In one fluid motion, Zachary drew his revolver and leveled it at Holloway's chest. "You're not branding people on my watch. You're making a mistake, boy," Holloway spat, but his hands remained carefully visible. Zachary knelt beside Willow, his eyes never leaving Holloway. "You're not property anymore," he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "Never were, never should have been." Spring 1874 had arrived in the New Mexico territory with unforgiving heat and an equally unforgiving drought. For Willow Reed, 23 and born into servitude despite the Emancipation Proclamation's promises, it would become the season that changed everything. 3 days earlier, she had tried to escape the Circle M ranch, slipping away in the dead of night with nothing but the clothes on her back and a stolen canteen. Holloway's men had tracked her down before she made it 10 miles. She'd known the punishment would be severe, but not this. Never this. Zachary Xavier had only been working as a hand at the Circle M for 2 weeks. A drifter, 30 years old with hard eyes that had seen too much since the war ended, he kept to himself, did his work without complaint, and stayed out of Holloway's business. Until today. "Drop the gun, Xavier," Holloway said, gesturing to his foreman and 3 ranch hands who were now moving toward them, hands on their weapons. "I'll be taking her with me," Zachary replied, his voice steady. "You'll be dead is what you'll be." Willow saw Zachary's jaw tighten. He was outnumbered, and they both knew it. The pain in her shoulder pulsed with each rapid heartbeat as she tried to think through their impossible situation. $500, Zachary said suddenly. "For the woman." Holloway laughed. "She ain't worth half that." 500. Cash. Right now. A tense silence followed. Holloway's eyes narrowed as he studied Zachary. "Let me see this money." Keeping his gun trained on Holloway, Zachary reached slowly into his vest with his free hand and pulled out a leather pouch. He tossed it to the ground between them. "Count it." Holloway nodded to his foreman, who picked up the pouch and quickly tallied the contents. The man looked up in surprise and nodded. "All right, Xavier. Take your new property." Holloway smirked. "Though that brand means she'll always be Circle M, no matter who thinks they own her now." "She's not property," Zachary said again, louder this time. "She's a free woman." He helped Willow to her feet, gently untying the gag from her mouth. Her legs trembled beneath her, barely supporting her weight. "I'll need some supplies," Zachary said. "Food, water, bandages." "Your generosity already bought her freedom," Holloway sneered. "Anything else comes extra." "Fine." Zachary's voice was ice. "We'll make do." He guided Willow toward the stable where his horse waited, a tall black gelding with one white sock. She was dizzy from the pain, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Had this stranger really paid for her freedom? Or was she simply changing owners? "Why?" she managed to whisper as he helped her onto the horse. Zachary looked up at her, his expression unreadable again. Nobody deserves to be branded like cattle. He mounted behind her, one arm supporting her while the other held the reins. "I'm taking you somewhere safe. Then you can go wherever you want." As they rode away from the Circle M, Willow could feel Holloway's eyes boring into her back. She had no illusions about what this meant. He would come for her again. Men like Marcus Holloway didn't let go of what they considered theirs. Not without a fight. The ride was agony. Every step of the horse sent fresh waves of pain radiating from the brand on her shoulder. Willow bit her lip until she tasted blood, determined not to cry out. She had survived 23 years of hardship. She would survive this too. Not much farther, Zachary said after they'd been riding for what felt like hours. The sun was beginning to sink toward the western horizon, painting the desert in brilliant golds and reds. Where are we going? Willow asked, her voice hoarse. Small place I've been staying. It's not much, but it's quiet. Safe. They crested a ridge, and below them lay a small, weathered cabin nestled against a rocky outcropping. A creek trickled nearby, surrounded by a handful of scrubby trees offering rare shade in this harsh landscape. Is it yours? Belongs to a friend. He lets me use it when I'm passing through. Zachary dismounted and helped her down, his hands strong and steady. Up close, Willow could see the fine lines around his eyes, the small scar that cut through his right eyebrow, the flecks of gray just beginning to appear in his dark hair. Let's get that burn tended to, he said, leading her toward the cabin. Inside was sparse but clean, a small table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed against one wall, a fireplace with cooking implements. Zachary gestured for her to sit while he rummaged through a trunk, producing clean cloths, a jar of salve, and a bottle of whiskey. This will hurt, he warned, uncorking the bottle. Willow steeled herself. I can handle it. When the whiskey hit the burn, she nearly passed out from the pain, gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. Zachary worked quickly, cleaning the wound with gentle, practiced movements. You've done this before, she observed through gritted teeth. War teaches you things. He didn't elaborate further. The salve will help with the healing and keep infection away. As he dressed the wound, Willow studied him. Why did you help me? Zachary was quiet for a long moment, focusing on his task. Some things a man can't stand by and watch, he finally said. Branding a human being is one of them. You paid $500. Money's just money. That's more than most people see in years. He shrugged. I've been saving. For what? A place of my own, maybe. He finished bandaging her shoulder. Plans change. Willow fell silent, too exhausted to press further. The enormity of what had happened was beginning to sink in. She was free, truly free for the first time in her life. The thought was so overwhelming that she didn't know how to process it. You should rest, Zachary said, stepping back. Take the bed. I'll sleep by the fire. I can't take your bed. It's not mine to give, but you need it more than I do tonight. Too tired to argue, Willow nodded. She lay down gingerly, positioning herself to keep pressure off her injured shoulder. Despite the pain, exhaustion quickly pulled her toward sleep. Thank you, she whispered as her eyes grew heavy. If Zachary responded, she didn't hear it. Darkness claimed her, bringing blessed relief from the pain. Willow woke to the smell of coffee and the soft sound of a fire crackling. For a moment, disoriented by sleep, she forgot where she was. Then the pain in her shoulder flared, and everything came rushing back. Zachary sat at the table, cleaning a revolver with methodical precision. He glanced up when she stirred. Morning, he said. Coffee's hot if you want some. Willow sat up slowly, wincing. What time is it? Just past dawn. He holstered the clean gun and poured coffee into a tin cup, bringing it to her. How's the shoulder? Hurts. She took the cup gratefully. But I'll live. We should change that bandage. As he carefully removed the old dressing, Willow got her first look at the brand. The Circle M stood out angry and red against her dark skin. She turned away, bile rising in her throat. It's not as bad as it could be, Zachary said quietly. Clean burn. Should heal without too much trouble. It'll always be there, she whispered. Scars tell stories. Doesn't mean the story owns you. He applied fresh salve and a new bandage, his touch gentle but efficient. When he was done, he returned to the table and pushed a plate toward her. Eat something. Need to keep your strength up. The plate held dried beef, a hunk of bread, and a few dried apples. Simple fare, but Willow realized she was starving. She joined him at the table, eating slowly, savoring each bite. What happens now? She asked when she had finished. Zachary looked at her thoughtfully. That depends on you. You're free to go wherever you want. I don't have anywhere to go. The admission hurt almost as much as her shoulder. I don't know anyone outside the Circle M. There's a town about 2 days' ride from here. Silver Creek. Decent place. They might have work. What kind of work would someone like me find? You have skills, don't you? Willow thought about it. I can cook. So, I worked in the house mostly. She hesitated. I can read and write. The missus taught me when I was young, before she died. Zachary raised his eyebrows. That's valuable. More than most have. What about you? She asked. Will you go back to the Circle M? His expression hardened. No, that bridge is burned. Because of me. Because of Holloway. He stood and began gathering supplies into a saddlebag. We should move on today. It's not safe to stay too long in one place. You think he'll come after us? It wasn't a question, but Zachary answered anyway. Men like Holloway don't let go easy, especially when they think their pride's been wounded. Fear tightened Willow's chest. I can leave. Go my own way. You've done enough. Zachary stopped what he was doing and looked at her directly. And leave you for Holloway to find? No. I made a choice when I stepped in. I'll see it through. To what end? Until you're somewhere safe. Somewhere he can't reach you. The intensity in his eyes made Willow look away. She wasn't used to someone caring what happened to her. It was unsettling, yet strangely comforting. All right, she said. We'll go to Silver Creek. They left the cabin before midday, Zachary leading the way on his black gelding, Willow riding a brown mare he'd apparently been keeping at the cabin. The day was clear but hot, the sun beating down mercilessly as they traveled across the open terrain. Zachary was vigilant, constantly scanning their surroundings, occasionally stopping to check their back trail. His caution was infectious, and Willow found herself jumping at small sounds, imagining Holloway's men behind every rock and cactus. Have you always been a cowboy? She asked during a brief rest in the shade of an outcropping. Zachary handed her a canteen. No. Grew up on a farm in Tennessee. Fought in the war. Drifted west after. Which side? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Union. He met her eyes steadily. My family didn't hold with slavery. Willow nodded, feeling a small weight lift from her chest. The war was supposed to end it all. But some things don't change just because the law says they should. No, Zachary agreed. They don't. They rode until dusk, making camp in a small arroyo where the high walls would hide their fire from distant eyes. Zachary efficiently set up camp, while Willow gathered what little firewood they could find. Her shoulder ached from the day's ride, but she welcomed having a task to focus on. As they sat by the small fire eating a simple meal of jerky and hardtack, Willow studied the man across from her. In the flickering light, shadows danced across the planes of his face, highlighting the sharp angle of his jaw, the straight line of his nose. There was a weariness to him, but also a quiet strength. You said you were saving for a place of your own, she said. What kind of place? Zachary poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks swirling upward. Ranch, maybe. Nothing big. Just enough land to run some cattle. Build something that lasts. And now that money's gone. He shrugged. I can earn more. I'll pay you back, Willow said firmly. Every cent. Zachary looked at her, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. If that's what you want. It is. She met his gaze without flinching. I won't be beholden to anyone. Fair enough. They fell into silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the distant call of a coyote. Willow wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling the chill of the desert night. Get some sleep, Zachary said. I'll take first watch. Wake me for my turn. He nodded, though Willow suspected he had no intention of doing so. Sure enough, when she woke to the pale light of dawn, he was still sitting by the remnants of the fire, his revolver across his knees. You didn't wake me, she accused. You needed the rest, he replied simply. We've got another long day ahead. They broke camp quickly and continued their journey, following a route that Zachary said would keep them away from the main trails where they might encounter other travelers or Holloway's men. As the day wore on, Willow found her thoughts returning to the brand on her shoulder. What would people think when they saw it? Would they assume she was a runaway? A thief? The mark would follow her forever, a visible reminder of what she had endured. What's on your mind? Zachary asked, breaking into her thoughts. Willow hesitated, then decided on honesty. The brand. People will see it and know. Know what? That I was. She couldn't bring herself to say property. Zachary's expression softened. Plenty of people out here carrying scars, visible and otherwise. Most decent folks don't pry. And the indecent ones, they'll judge no matter what. He adjusted his hat against the sun. Can't live your life worrying about what the wrong sort of people think. It was easy for him to say, Willow thought. He wasn't the one marked. They stopped briefly at midday to rest the horses and eat a cold lunch in the scant shade of a Joshua tree. The landscape had been changing gradually, the flat desert giving way to rolling hills studded with juniper and pinyon. How much farther to Silver Creek? Willow asked. We should reach it by tomorrow afternoon if we keep this pace. And then what? Zachary looked at her. Then you start your new life. Free. The word still felt strange to Willow, as if it belonged to someone else. Freedom had always been an abstract concept, something other people had, not her. I don't know if I remember how to be free, she admitted quietly. You'll learn. They rode on as the afternoon heat intensified. Willow's shoulder throbbed with each step of her horse, but she kept pace without complaint. She had endured worse. As the sun began to set, they came upon a small stream cutting through a grove of cottonwoods, an oasis in the arid landscape. Zachary declared it a good place to make camp, and Willow gratefully dismounted. While Zachary tended to the horses, Willow knelt by the stream, splashing cool water on her face and neck. The simple pleasure of clean water against her skin made her close her eyes in appreciation. Mind if I check that shoulder? Zachary asked when she returned to camp. Willow sat on a fallen log as he carefully removed the bandage. His fingers were calloused but gentle, and despite the pain, she found his touch oddly comforting. Looks better, he said. Still angry, but no signs of infection. Small mercies, she murmured. He reapplied the salve and bandaged the wound, then handed her a portion of their dwindling supplies for dinner. They ate in companionable silence as darkness fell around them. The night was clear, the sky ablaze with stars. I've never seen so many stars, Willow said, gazing upward. At the ranch, there were always lamps burning. Out here, there's nothing between you and the heavens. Zachary leaned back against his saddle. Makes a man feel small. In a good way? Sometimes. He was quiet for a moment. Reminds you there's something bigger than whatever troubles you're carrying. Willow considered this. I like that thought. As the night deepened, Zachary insisted again on taking first watch. This time, Willow didn't argue. The day's ride had left her bone weary, and sleep came quickly once she wrapped herself in the blanket he offered. She dreamed of running through endless desert, the brand on her shoulder burning like a beacon, guiding Holloway's men to her. No matter how fast she ran, they were always just behind her, their laughter echoing across the sand. She woke with a gasp to find Zachary's hand on her arm. Just a dream, he said quietly. Willow took a shuddering breath. Sorry. No need to apologize. He handed her a canteen. Want to talk about it? She shook her head, taking a long drink of water. Just old fears. Zachary nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sun'll be up soon. Should get moving. They ate a hasty breakfast and broke camp as the eastern sky began to lighten. The day promised to be another scorcher, but Willow found herself feeling oddly hopeful. Silver Creek was within reach. A new beginning. They had been riding for perhaps 2 hours when Zachary suddenly reined in his horse, holding up a hand for Willow to stop. What is it? She whispered, instantly alert. Zachary pointed to a plume of dust in the distance. Riders. Coming fast. Willow's heart hammered in her chest. Holloway. Can't tell yet. His expression was grim. But we're not waiting to find out. He led them off the trail they'd been following, urging their horses into a stand of juniper trees that offered some concealment. From this vantage point, they could see the approaching riders without being immediately visible. For men, Zachary murmured as the riders drew closer, moving with purpose. Willow squinted against the sunlight. As the riders came into clearer view, her blood ran cold. That's Holloway's foreman. Tucker. Zachary's hand moved to his revolver. You sure? Yes. She would never forget the man who had held her down for the branding. The one in the red kerchief. They haven't seen us yet. Zachary calculated quickly. If they keep on that trail, they'll pass us by. They watched in tense silence as the riders approached. For a moment, it seemed they would indeed continue past their hiding spot. Then, without warning, one of the men pointed in their direction and shouted something to the others. They've spotted the horses, Zachary said, drawing his revolver. Willow, I need you to ride. Hard as you can. There's a box canyon about a mile east. Hide there. What about you? I'll slow them down. His eyes were cold, determined. Give you a head start. I can't leave you to face them alone. This isn't a discussion. He handed her his compass. East. Go. Now. Before she could protest further, he slapped her horse's rump, sending it bolting from their cover. Willow struggled to maintain control, looking back to see Zachary positioning himself among the trees, revolver ready. The sound of gunfire erupted behind her as she rode, spurring her horse faster. Fear and guilt warred within her, fear for herself, guilt at leaving Zachary to face 4 armed men alone. But she kept riding, following his instructions, heading east toward the promised sanctuary of the Box Canyon. The terrain grew increasingly rocky, forcing her to slow her pace. She glanced back repeatedly, but saw no sign of pursuit. Had Zachary succeeded in stopping them? Or worse, had he been killed in the attempt? The thought made her stomach clench. This man who had risked everything for her, a stranger, might have just sacrificed his life. When she reached the mouth of the canyon, Willow guided her horse deep inside, finding a spot where overhanging rocks provided some shelter. She dismounted, tethering the horse to a scrubby bush, and climbed to a position where she could see the canyon entrance without being easily spotted. And then she waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the canyon walls. Willow's mouth grew dry with thirst and fear. She rationed small sips from her canteen, eyes never leaving the canyon entrance. When a rider finally appeared, she held her breath, hand tightening on the small knife Zachary had given her the day before. The rider moved slowly, cautiously. It took her several seconds to recognize Zachary's broad shoulders, the familiar silhouette of his hat. Relief flooded through her so powerfully, she nearly cried out. She scrambled down from her perch and ran to meet him as he entered the canyon. "You're alive," she breathed. Zachary dismounted stiffly, and Willow saw with alarm that his left sleeve was soaked with blood. "What happened? Are you all right?" "Just a graze." He leaned heavily against his horse. They weren't expecting resistance. Got 2 of them before the others decided the fight wasn't worth it. "You killed them?" Willow asked, helping him to a boulder where he could sit. "One for certain. The other? Maybe." He grimaced as she helped him remove his jacket. "Tucker got away. He'll report back to Holloway." Willow examined his wounded deep furrow along his upper arm, where a bullet had torn through flesh but, thankfully, missed bone. Using water from her canteen, she cleaned it as best she could, then tore strips from her petticoat to bind it. "We need to keep moving," Zachary said, watching her work. "They'll come back with more men. You need rest." Willow tied off the makeshift bandage. "You've lost blood. Can't rest yet." He stood, swaying slightly. "Silver Creek isn't far. We can make it by nightfall if we push." Willow wanted to argue, but the determination in his eyes stopped her. Instead, she helped him back onto his horse, worry gnawing at her. The man had already given so much for her freedom. What more would this journey cost him? They rode out of the canyon cautiously, Zachary leading the way despite his injury. He set a demanding pace, stopping only when absolutely necessary to rest the horses or take a quick drink. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Willow could see fatigue etched in every line of Zachary's body. As the afternoon waned, the landscape began to change. The barren desert gave way to scattered pine trees, and the air grew noticeably cooler. They crested a rise, and there in the valley below lay Silver Creek, a small but proper town with wooden buildings lining a main street, smoke rising from chimneys, the spire of a church visible against the darkening sky. "We made it," Willow whispered. Zachary nodded, his face drawn with pain and exhaustion. "Let's find a place to stay before dark." They rode down into the town, attracting curious glances from the few people still out in the evening hours. Willow was acutely aware of her disheveled appearance and Zachary's blood-stained shirt. At the far end of the main street stood a 2-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Silver Creek Hotel. Zachary directed them there, dismounting with difficulty before helping Willow down. "Wait here with the horses," he said. "I'll get us rooms." Willow watched anxiously as he disappeared inside. Minutes later, he emerged with a set of keys. "They have a stable round back," he said, "and rooms for the night." They led the horses to the small stable behind the hotel, where a young boy took charge of them. Zachary gave the lad extra coins to ensure the animals were well cared for, then guided Willow back to the hotel's entrance. Inside, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor waited at the front desk. She looked them over with undisguised curiosity. "Mr. Xavier," she said, nodding to Zachary. "I've prepared the rooms you requested." Her gaze lingered on his bloodied sleeve. "There's a doctor in town if you're needing one." "Much obliged, madam, but it's nothing serious." The woman's attention turned to Willow, taking in her trail-worn appearance. "Supper's being served in the dining room for another hour, if you're hungry." "Thank you," Willow said softly. The woman, Mrs. Tate, according to the nameplate on the desk, handed them each a key. "Rooms 3 and 4, top of the stairs. There's a washroom at the end of the hall." Zachary thanked her, and they climbed the stairs slowly, his fatigue evident in every step. At the top, he paused. "Get cleaned up. Rest. I'll meet you for supper in half an hour." Willow nodded, but as she turned toward her room, she heard a sharp intake of breath. Zachary was leaning heavily against the wall, his face alarmingly pale. "You're not well," she said, moving quickly to support him. "Just need to sit down for a minute." She helped him to his room, unlocking the door and guiding him to the bed. He sat heavily, breathing with effort. "Let me look at your arm again," she insisted. Too weak to protest, he allowed her to remove his makeshift bandage. The wound was angry and red, still seeping blood. "This needs proper tending," Willow said firmly. "I'm going to find that doctor." "No need to trouble, this isn't a discussion," she said, echoing his words from earlier. "You've done enough for me. Now let me help you." Before he could argue further, she left, hurrying back downstairs to the front desk. Mrs. Tate looked up from her ledger. "My friend needs a doctor," Willow said. "His arm." "Dr. Morgan lives just down the street," Mrs. Tate replied. "Second house past the mercantile. But he might be at his office this time of day that's behind the apothecary." "Thank you." Willow hurried out into the street, now mostly deserted as evening settled over the town. She found the apothecary easily enough, with the doctor's office accessible through a side door. A small bell jingled as she entered. The office was empty save for an elderly man arranging bottles on a shelf. He turned at the sound of the bell, eyebrows raised in question. "Dr. Morgan?" Willow asked. "The same." He studied her with kind eyes. "What can I do for you, young lady?" "My friend is injured, a bullet wound in his arm. He's at the hotel." Dr. Morgan reached immediately for his medical bag. "Lead the way." They returned to the hotel, where Willow led the doctor to Zachary's room. She found him still sitting on the edge of the bed, looking even paler than before. "This is Dr. Morgan," she explained, as the doctor set his bag on the bedside table. "Let's have a look at this arm, shall we?" Dr. Morgan said, helping Zachary remove his shirt. The doctor examined the wound carefully, cleaning it thoroughly before applying a pungent-smelling salve and fresh bandages. He worked efficiently, asking few questions about how the injury had occurred. "You're lucky," he told Zachary. "Clean wound, no bullet fragments. But you've lost blood, and there's risk of infection. You need rest, food, and plenty of fluids." "How long?" Zachary asked. "Until you're fit to travel?" "At least a few days. Maybe a week." The doctor packed up his supplies. "I'll come back tomorrow to check the wound. Meanwhile, no exertion." After the doctor left, Willow helped Zachary into a clean shirt she found in his saddlebag. "You should have let me fetch the doctor myself," he grumbled. "And let you bleed all over Mrs. Tate's clean bedding? I think not." Willow tried for a light tone, but concern underlay her words. "You've done enough, Zachary. Let someone else help for once." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. "Thank you. Are you up to eating something?" Mrs. Tate said supper is still being served. "I could eat." Together they made their way downstairs to the small dining room, where a few other guests were finishing their meals. Mrs. Tate herself brought them plates of beef stew, cornbread, and coffee. "Doctor been to see you?" she asked, eyeing Zachary's fresh bandage. "Yes, madam." "Much obliged for the direction." "Good." She nodded approvingly. "Best doctor in the territory, Morgan is. You're in good hands." As they ate, Willow became aware of the other diners glancing their way, curiosity evident in their expressions. She kept her head down, focusing on her food, suddenly self-conscious of her appearance and the story their disheveled, trail-worn state told. "Don't mind them," Zachary said quietly, noticing her discomfort. Small town. Strangers are always interesting. What do they see when they look at us, I wonder? Does it matter? Willow touched her shoulder unconsciously, where the brand lay hidden beneath her dress. I suppose not. After supper, exhaustion finally claimed them both. They retired to their respective rooms, Willow pausing at her door. Will you be all right? She asked. Zachary nodded. Get some rest, Willow. We're safe here for now. In the privacy of her room, Willow finally allowed herself to truly relax. She washed away days of dust and fear in the small basin provided, changed into her single spare dress, and sat on the edge of the bed, marveling at the softness of the mattress after nights on hard ground. She thought about Zachary, wounded because of her, about the money he'd spent to buy her freedom, about the future that stretched before her, uncertain but full of possibilities she'd never dared imagine. For the first time in her life, she was truly free. The realization brought tears to her eyes, tears of relief, of gratitude, of lingering fear. She wasn't naive enough to believe that Holloway would simply let them go. But for tonight, at least, they were safe. Willow slept deeply that night, dreamless and peaceful. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the small window of her room. For a moment, she lay still, savoring the simple luxury of a real bed. A knock at her door roused her fully. She rose quickly, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders before opening the door to find Mrs. Tate with a tray. Brought you some breakfast, the older woman said. Figured you might want to eat in private this morning. Thank you. Willow accepted the tray, touched by the unexpected kindness. That's very thoughtful. Mrs. Tate hesitated, then said, Your friend Mr. Xavier, he's asking for you. Said it's important. Concern flared immediately. Is he all right? Seems well enough, considering. Mrs. Tate's expression softened. He's a good man, that one. Can see it in his eyes. Yes, Willow agreed. He is. After eating quickly, she made her way to Zachary's room. She found him sitting up in bed, looking better than the night before, though still pale. You wanted to see me? She asked. Zachary nodded. Close the door. Once she had, he continued in a low voice. I've been thinking. We need to make plans. Holloway won't give up easily. What kind of plans? Silver Creek is safe for now, but not forever. We need somewhere more permanent. Somewhere Holloway won't think to look. Willow sat in the chair beside his bed. You have somewhere in mind? Maybe. He shifted, wincing slightly. I have a friend. Arthur Johnson. Has a ranch about 50 miles north of here. Good man. Fought with him during the war. And you think he'd help us? I know he would. Zachary's eyes were steady on hers. But we'd need a story. A reason for being there together. Willow frowned. What kind of story? Zachary hesitated, then said, The simplest would be that we're married. Willow stared at him, certain she had misheard. Married. Just as a story, he clarified quickly. People ask fewer questions about a husband and wife than they do about two unrelated travelers. I see. Willow considered the idea. It made logical sense, but something about it unsettled her. And how long would we need to maintain this pretense? Until we're sure Holloway's given up. Or until you decide where you want to go next. Willow stood, pacing the small room. So I would be trading one lie for another. One form of hiding for another. It's not ideal, Zachary admitted. But it might keep you alive. Keep us alive, you mean? She turned to face him. You're in as much danger as I am now. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I've been in danger before. Not because of me. She sat down again, her decision made. All right, we'll go to your friend's ranch. And we'll tell whatever story is necessary to stay safe. Relief flickered across his face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Willow's voice was firm. I have conditions. Name them. First, we stay only until you're fully recovered and we've earned enough to move on. I won't impose on your friend's hospitality indefinitely. Zachary nodded. Fair enough. Second, I work. Real work with real pay. Not as your wife. She stumbled slightly over the word. Arthur always needs help on the ranch. I'm sure he'll be glad for an extra pair of hands. And third, Willow hesitated, then plunged ahead. I want to learn to shoot. To defend myself. Zachary studied her for a long moment. You sure about that? I won't be helpless again. Her voice was steel. Not ever. All right, he agreed. I'll teach you myself. Once this arm heals. They spent the next few days recuperating in Silver Creek. Dr. Morgan visited daily to check Zachary's wound, declaring himself satisfied with the healing progress. Willow used some of their dwindling funds to purchase necessities, clothing, ammunition for Zachary's revolver, basic supplies for the journey ahead. The town was small but welcoming. Most people minded their own business, though Willow occasionally caught curious glances. She kept the brand on her shoulder carefully hidden, wearing high-neck dresses despite the heat. On their 5th day in town, as Willow was returning from the mercantile with supplies, she noticed a group of riders entering the far end of the main street. Something about their manner, purposeful, vigilant, made her step quickly into the shadow of a building. Her heart stuttered when she recognized the lead rider, Marcus Holloway himself, with Tucker and 2 other men she didn't recognize. They moved slowly down the street, stopping occasionally to speak to townspeople. Looking for us, she thought with certainty. She waited until they had passed, then hurried back to the hotel by a circuitous route, taking care not to be seen. She found Zachary in his room, carefully cleaning his revolver. "Holloway's in town," she said without preamble, "with Tucker and 2 others. Zachary's expression hardened. "You're sure? I saw them myself. They were asking questions." He stood, moving to the window to peer cautiously out at the street below. "We need to leave. Now." "Is your arm? It's good enough." He began gathering his few belongings. "Pack your things. We'll go out the back way." Willow hurried to her room, throwing her new purchases into her saddlebag. She changed quickly into the riding clothes she'd bought, practical trousers and a sturdy shirt that would make the journey easier. When she returned to Zachary's room, she found him fully dressed, his gun belt buckled securely around his waist. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes." They made their way downstairs, finding Mrs. Tate at her usual post behind the desk. She looked up, surprise registering at their travel-ready appearance. "Leaving us so soon?" she asked. "Afraid so, madam," Zachary said smoothly. "Got word of work up north. Need to move quickly to catch it." Mrs. Tate's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded. "I'll have the boy bring your horses round." "Much obliged. And if anyone comes asking after us." "Never saw you," Mrs. Tate finished with a knowing look. "You paid in advance, left no name in my register. Just passing through." Zachary placed additional coins on the desk. "Thank you, madam." "Take care of yourselves," she said, her gaze lingering on Willow. "Both of you." They slipped out the back door of the hotel, where the stable boy was already waiting with their horses. Zachary helped Willow mount, then swung up into his own saddle, his movements fluid despite his injury. Instead of taking the main road, they cut behind the buildings, following a narrow track that led away from town to the north. Zachary set a brisk pace, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "How far to your friend's ranch?" Willow asked when they'd put a few miles between themselves and Silver Creek. 2 days' ride, if we push, Zachary replied. "We'll need to be careful. Stay off the main trails." They rode through the day, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses. As evening approached, they found a sheltered spot near a small stream to make camp. "No fire tonight," Zachary said as he unsaddled the horses. "Can't risk the smoke being seen." They ate a cold supper of beef jerky and hardtack, speaking little. The encounter with Holloway had left them both on edge, the brief respite of Silver Creek now behind them. As darkness fell, Willow wrapped herself in a blanket, leaning against her saddle. Despite the hard ground beneath her, she was grateful to be away from town, away from the immediate threat of discovery. "I'll take first watch," Zachary said, checking his revolver before settling against a boulder with clear sight lines in all directions. Willow nodded, too tired to argue. But as she closed her eyes, a question nagged at her. "Zachary, why are you doing all this? For me?" In the darkness, she couldn't see his expression, but his voice was thoughtful when he finally answered. "During the war, I saw what happens when people look away, when they decide someone else's suffering isn't their concern." He paused. "I swore I wouldn't be that kind of man." "Is that all?" Willow pressed, sensing there was more. "No," he admitted after a long moment. "There's something about you, Willow. A strength, a dignity, despite everything. I admire that." The simple honesty of his words touched something in her, warming her more effectively than any fire could have. She fell asleep with his words echoing in her mind, feeling strangely protected despite the dangers that surrounded them. They broke camp before dawn, continuing their journey northward. The terrain became increasingly rugged, with pine forests giving way to open meadows, then back to forest again. Zachary seemed to know the land well, navigating without hesitation. By midday, they had climbed to higher elevation, where the air was cooler and the views stretched for miles. Zachary reined in his horse at the crest of a ridge. "See that valley?" He pointed to a distant green expanse. "Arthur's ranch is there. Johnson's Valley, they call it." Willow shaded her eyes, taking in the peaceful scene below. "It's beautiful. One of the prettiest places in the territory." A rare smile touched Zachary's lips. "Good grazing land. Good water. Arthur's done well for himself." They continued on, descending toward the valley. As they drew closer, Willow could make out buildings: a substantial main house, a large barn, several outbuildings, all nestled against the backdrop of forested hills. It was late afternoon when they finally approached the ranch proper. A tall fence surrounded the immediate grounds, with a wide gate standing open in welcome. As they rode through, a dog began barking, alerting the household to their arrival. A man emerged from the barn broad-shouldered, with a thick beard streaked with gray. He squinted at them for a moment, then broke into a wide grin. "Zachary Xavier, as I live and breathe," he called, striding toward them. "What brings you to my humble abode?" Zachary dismounted, embracing the man warmly. "Arthur, good to see you, old friend." Arthur Johnson clapped him on the back, then stepped back to look him over. His eyes narrowed at the evidence of Zachary's injury. "Trouble following you again, I see." "Something like that." Zachary turned, gesturing to Willow. "Arthur, I'd like you to meet my wife, Willow." Willow tensed at the lie, but managed to smile as Arthur helped her down from her horse. "Your wife?" Arthur's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Well now, that's news indeed. Welcome to Johnson's Valley, Mrs. Xavier." "Thank you for having us," Willow said, the new name feeling strange on her tongue. "Any friend of Zach's is welcome here, let alone his wife." Arthur's keen eyes studied her face. "Though I must say, he's never mentioned being married before." "It's recent," Zachary said smoothly. "And we've had some trouble. Need a place to lie low for a while." Arthur's expression grew serious. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that follows with guns," Zachary replied. "I'll explain everything, but perhaps inside." Of course, of course." Arthur gestured toward the main house. "Maureen will be delighted to have company. She's always saying this place is too quiet." As they walked toward the house, Willow felt a pang of guilt at the deception. Arthur Johnson seemed like a good man, genuinely happy to see his friend. And now they were involving him in their dangerous situation, all based on a lie. The main house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, 2 stories of solid construction, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. A woman was waiting at the door, wiping her hands on her apron. "We have guests, Maureen," Arthur called. Zachary Xavier and his wife, Willow. Maureen Johnson was a plump, pleasant-faced woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked dark hair. Like her husband, she showed surprise at the word wife, but recovered quickly. "Welcome to our home," she said warmly. "You must be exhausted from your journey. Come inside. I've just put coffee on." The interior of the house was comfortable and well-appointed, not luxurious, but speaking of prosperity earned through hard work. Maureen ushered them into a spacious kitchen, where the promised coffee was indeed brewing, filling the air with its rich aroma. Sit," she insisted, bustling about to set cups on the table. "You look like you haven't had a proper meal in days." "That would be accurate," Zachary admitted with a small smile. As Maureen served coffee and slices of freshly baked bread with butter, Arthur leaned forward, his expression serious. "Now then, what's this trouble you mentioned?" Zachary glanced at Willow, who nodded slightly. They had agreed on the journey to tell Arthur a version of the truth, not the full story, but enough that he would understand the danger. "We had a run-in with Marcus Holloway," Zachary began. "He's not the kind to forgive and forget." Arthur's expression darkened. "Holloway? That snake from down Silver Creek way?" "The same. What did you do to cross him?" Zachary's jaw tightened. "Let's just say I objected to his treatment of someone who couldn't defend themselves." Arthur studied his friend for a long moment, then nodded. "Always did have a strong sense of right and wrong, Zach. Sometimes stronger than your sense of self-preservation." We need somewhere to stay, Zachary said. Just until things cool down. I can work for our keep. Nonsense, Arthur said firmly. Your family, Zach. Always have been. You and your wife are welcome here as long as you need. I can work too, Willow spoke up. I'm good with cooking, sewing, whatever's needed. Maureen smiled warmly at her. Another pair of hands is always welcome, dear. But first, you both need rest. You look dead on your feet. They were shown to a comfortable bedroom on the second floor with a large bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the valley. When they were alone, Willow turned to Zachary, her voice low. I don't like lying to them. Neither do I, he admitted. But it's safer this way, for them and for us. What if Holloway tracks us here? Arthur can handle himself. This place is well protected. Zachary sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the long journey clearly taking its toll. But we won't stay longer than necessary, just until we figure out our next move. Willow nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at her. What was their next move? Where would she go when this was over? The future stretched before her, full of possibilities, but also deeply uncertain. You should rest, she said, noticing the lines of fatigue etched into Zachary's face. Your arm needs time to heal properly. He didn't argue, stretching out on the bed with a sigh. Within minutes, he was asleep, his breathing deep and even. Willow watched him for a moment, struck by how vulnerable he looked in sleep. The hard edges of his expression softened. This man had risked everything for her. His money, his safety, his life. And now they were bound together by circumstances neither had anticipated. What would become of them when those circumstances changed? The question followed her as she quietly left the room, making her way back downstairs. She found Maureen in the kitchen, preparing what looked to be a substantial dinner. Can I help? Willow asked. Maureen looked up with a smile. I never turn down help in the kitchen. You can peel those potatoes, if you don't mind. Willow set to work, grateful for the simple, familiar task. As they worked side by side, Maureen chatted easily about the ranch, the neighbors, the upcoming summer festivities in the nearby town. How did you and Zachary meet? She asked eventually, the question Willow had been dreading. Through mutual acquaintances, Willow replied vaguely. It wasn't exactly a conventional courtship. Maureen chuckled. Nothing about Zach has ever been conventional. He's a good man, though. One of the best Arthurs ever known. How do they know each other? The war. Maureen's expression grew more serious. Arthur was Zach's commanding officer for a time. Says Zach saved his life more than once. This was new information to Willow. Zachary had mentioned fighting in the war, but little else about his past. Zach doesn't talk much about those days, Maureen continued. None of them do, really. But it forged bonds that last a lifetime. The evening passed pleasantly, with a hearty dinner followed by conversation around the fireplace. Arthur regaled them with stories of ranch life, while Maureen pressed Willow for details about their wedding that she improvised as best she could. Throughout the evening, Willow was aware of Zachary watching her, his eyes thoughtful. He played his part well, touching her hand occasionally, referring to her as my wife, with a conviction that almost made her believe it herself. When they finally retired for the night, the awkwardness of their situation became impossible to ignore. One room, one bed, and a pretense to maintain. I'll sleep on the floor, Zachary said immediately, gathering an extra blanket from the chest at the foot of the bed. Don't be ridiculous, Willow protested. Your arm is still healing. You need proper rest. I've slept in worse places. The bed is plenty large enough for both of us, Willow said practically. We can maintain proper distance. Zachary hesitated, then nodded. If you're sure. They prepared for bed with careful politeness, each hyper-aware of the other's presence. When they finally lay down, as far apart as the bed would allow, Willow found herself acutely conscious of Zachary's breathing, the warmth radiating from his body. Zachary, she whispered into the darkness. Thank you. For everything you've done. There was a long pause before he replied, his voice soft. You don't need to thank me, Willow. Yes, I do. She turned on her side to face him, though she could barely make out his silhouette in the darkness. You gave up everything. For a stranger. You're not a stranger anymore. The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to examine too closely. Willow fell asleep pondering his words, wondering what exactly she had become to this quiet, honorable man who had changed the course of her life. The days at Johnson's Valley fell into a rhythm. True to her word, Willow made herself useful, helping Maureen with household tasks and learning the routines of ranch life. Zachary, despite his injury, insisted on working alongside Arthur and the ranch hands, though he was careful not to strain his healing arm. A week passed, then two. Willow found herself settling into life at the ranch with surprising ease. She enjoyed the predictability of the days, the simple pleasures of good food and honest work, the company of the Johnsons, who treated her with unfailing kindness. And then there was Zachary, living in close quarters, continuing their pretense of marriage. She found herself growing increasingly aware of him in ways that had nothing to do with gratitude. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. The gentle confidence of his hands as he worked with the horses. The quiet attentiveness with which he listened when others spoke. One afternoon, as promised, he began teaching her to shoot. They found a secluded spot at the edge of the property, setting up targets against a hillside. The key is steadiness, Zachary explained, showing her how to hold his revolver. Breathe out as you squeeze the trigger, don't pull it. Willow's first attempts went wide, the recoil stronger than she'd expected. But she persisted, determined to master this skill. By the end of their session, she had hit the target several times, earning a nod of approval from her teacher. "You're a natural," Zachary said. "A few more sessions, and you'll be out shooting me." "Somehow I doubt that," Willow replied, but she was pleased with her progress. As they walked back to the house, Zachary stopped suddenly, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "What is it?" she asked. "You're different," he said, "from when I first met you. Stronger. More. Yourself." Willow considered his words. "I suppose I am. Freedom changes a person. It suits you." The simple compliment warmed her more than it should have. They continued walking, a comfortable silence between them that somehow felt more intimate than words. That evening, after dinner, Arthur pulled Zachary aside for a private conversation. Willow helped Maureen with the dishes, trying not to worry about what they might be discussing. When the men returned, Arthur's expression was grave. "Word from town," he said, addressing both Willow and Maureen. "Holloway's been asking questions about strangers in the area, offering rewards for information." Willow's stomach clenched with fear. "He's still looking for us." "Men like Holloway don't give up easily," Arthur confirmed, "especially when their pride's been wounded." Zachary's expression was grim. "We should move on. We've imposed on your hospitality long enough." "Nonsense," Arthur said firmly. "You're safer here than on the road. And Holloway has no reason to connect you with me. But if he does, then we'll deal with it." Arthur's tone brooked no argument. "This is my home, Zach. My land. No one threatens my family or my guests." The conversation left Willow uneasy. Despite Arthur's assurances, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were bringing danger to this peaceful place. That night, as she lay beside Zachary in their shared bed, she voiced her concerns. "Maybe Arthur's right," Zachary said after listening. "Moving now might be more dangerous than staying. At least here we have walls, supplies, people we can trust." "But for how long?" Willow asked. "We can't hide forever." Zachary was quiet for a moment. "No," he agreed finally. "We can't. So what do we do? I've been thinking about that." He turned to face her, his expression serious even in the dim light. "There's a town about 100 miles north of here. Redemption. It's growing fast, needs people with skills. We could start fresh there." Willow repeated, her heart beating faster. Zachary hesitated. "If you wanted. Or you could go your own way." The thought of leaving him, of facing an uncertain future alone, filled Willow with a surprising sense of loss. Over these weeks, he had become more than her rescuer, more than her protector. He had become essential. "I think," she said carefully, "that we make a good team." Something shifted in Zachary's expression, relief, perhaps, or something deeper. "I think so too." They fell silent, but it was a different kind of silence than before, charged with unspoken possibilities. Willow fell asleep with her hand just inches from his, aware of every breath he took. The following days brought a flurry of activity at the ranch. A neighboring rancher was hosting a harvest festival, and the Johnsons were expected to attend. Despite their concerns about Holloway, Arthur insisted that Zachary and Willow accompany them. "Everyone for 20 miles will be there," he argued. "You'll draw more attention by not going. Besides, your husband and wife, as far as anyone knows. Just another couple at the festival. So it was decided. Maureen helped Willow prepare, lending her a pretty blue dress for the occasion. As Willow studied her reflection in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The woman looking back at her seemed impossibly different from the one who had been branded like cattle just weeks ago. The brand itself was healing well, though it would leave a permanent scar. Willow had grown accustomed to arranging her clothing to hide it, to carrying herself with a confidence that belied the mark's existence. But she never forgot it was there a reminder of how far she had come, and how far she still had to go. The festival was held at the Thornton Ranch, a sprawling property with ample space for the gathering. Trestle tables had been set up outdoors, loaded with food. A wooden platform served as a dance floor, with local musicians providing lively tunes. Lanterns hung from trees, waiting to be lit as evening fell. Willow felt a flutter of anxiety as they arrived, conscious of the many strangers around them. Zachary must have sensed her unease, for he took her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "Just stay close," he murmured. "We'll be fine." Arthur introduced them to several neighbors, presenting them simply as Zachary and his wife, visiting from the south. No one questioned the story, though Willow caught a few curious glances. As the afternoon progressed, she began to relax, even enjoying the festivities. The food was delicious, the music cheerful, the company pleasant. When Zachary asked her to dance, she accepted without hesitation. His hand at her waist was warm and steady as he guided her through the steps of a simple waltz. Willow had never learned to dance properly, but Zachary led with quiet confidence, making it easy to follow. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Xavier," she said as they moved across the dance floor. "I wouldn't have taken you for a dancer." A smile touched his lips. "My mother insisted all her sons learn. Said it was a necessary skill for civilized men." "Tell me more about your family," Willow asked, realizing how little she knew about his past. "You've never mentioned them before." "Not much to tell. Parents had a small farm in Tennessee. Father died before the war. Mother after. 3 brothers all gone now." "I'm sorry." Zachary shrugged slightly. "It was a long time ago. Is that why you came west? After losing everyone?" "Partly." His eyes met hers. "Needed somewhere new. Somewhere I could just be Zachary Xavier, not someone's son or brother or soldier." Willow nodded, understanding the desire to leave the past behind, to create a new identity unburdened by what had come before. "What about you?" Zachary asked. "Your family." The question opened a door Willow usually kept firmly closed. But something about this moment, the music, the gathering dusk, the warmth of Zachary's hand in hers made her willing to step through it. "My mother was a house slave in Georgia. My father was the plantation owner's son." She spoke the words matter-of-factly, though they were anything but. "I never knew either of them. My mother died when I was born. My father never acknowledged me." Zachary's expression remained steady, accepting. "And after the war? The plantation was in ruins. The old master was dead. His widow sold what was left, including those of us who had nowhere else to go. That's how I ended up with Holloway." "You never tried to leave before?" "Once. Early on." Willow's voice grew quieter. "The punishment was severe. I didn't try again until you saw me." Zachary's hand tightened on hers, a silent acknowledgement of what she'd endured. "You're the bravest person I've ever known, Willow Reed." The simple statement, spoken with such conviction, touched something deep within her. No one had ever seen her that way before, not as property, not as a victim, but as someone with courage and strength. As the music ended, they remained standing close together, reluctant to break the moment. It was Zachary who finally stepped back, though his eyes held hers for a beat longer than necessary. "I should check in with Arthur," he said. "Will you be all right for a few minutes?" Willow nodded, watching as he made his way through the crowd. She found a seat at one of the tables, content to observe the festivities around her. Couples danced, children played games, neighbors caught up on local gossip. A normal, peaceful scene, the kind she had never imagined being part of. "Mrs. Xavier, isn't it?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. Willow looked up to see a well-dressed older woman smiling down at her. She recognized her as Mrs. Thornton, the hostess of the festival. "Yes," Willow replied, the false name coming more easily now. "Thank you for your hospitality." "Not at all, dear. We're delighted to have new faces." Mrs. Thornton sat beside her, Arthur tells me you and your husband are considering settling in the area. We're exploring our options, Willow said carefully. Well, we can certainly use more good people. Mrs. Thornton patted her hand, especially those with skills. Arthur mentioned you're quite accomplished in the domestic arts. I enjoy cooking and sewing, yes. Our little town is growing rapidly. The school is looking for a teacher's assistant, someone who can help with the younger children, teach them their letters and figures. Might that interest you? Willow stared at her, stunned by the suggestion. Me? A teacher? Why not? Arthur says you're educated, well-spoken. The children would benefit from your guidance. Before Willow could formulate a response, a commotion at the edge of the gathering caught her attention. Raised voices, the sound of horses approaching fast. She stood, scanning the crowd for Zachary. He appeared at her side as if summoned by her thoughts, his expression tense. We need to go? Now. What's happening? Riders coming in. Arthur thinks it might be Holloway's men. Fear shot through Willow like ice water. How could they have found us? Doesn't matter. We need to move. Zachary took her arm, guiding her toward the edge of the gathering opposite from where the commotion was coming from. They slipped away unnoticed as most of the festival goers were moving toward the disturbance. Zachary led her to where their horses were tethered, helping her mount quickly. What about Arthur and Maureen? Willow asked, worried for the kind couple who had sheltered them. They'll be fine. It's us Holloway wants. Zachary swung up onto his own horse. We'll head north, toward Redemption. Stay off the main roads. They rode hard, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the festival. The night was clear, the moon providing enough light to navigate by. Willow's mind raced with questions. How had Holloway tracked them? What would happen to the Johnsons? Where would they go now? After several miles, Zachary slowed their pace to give the horses a rest. They continued at a walk, alert for any signs of pursuit. I'm sorry, Willow said softly. Zachary glanced at her. For what? For bringing this danger to you. To the Johnsons. To everyone who's tried to help us. This isn't on you, Willow. Zachary's voice was firm. It's on Holloway. Men like him create their own justice, their own rules. They don't get to decide what's right. But if it weren't for me, if it weren't for you, he interrupted, I'd still be drifting, taking odd jobs, living without purpose. He looked at her, his expression earnest in the moonlight. Meeting you changed things for me too, Willow. The simple admission hung between them, profound in its honesty. Willow didn't know how to respond, so she remained silent, letting his words settle into her heart. They rode through the night, stopping only when the horses needed rest. By dawn, they had covered significant ground, the mountains that marked the northern boundary of Johnson's Valley well behind them. Zachary found a secluded spot near a small stream to make camp, though camp consisted of little more than a place to rest the horses and themselves. They had left the Johnsons in such haste that they had only what they carried: weapons, a little food, a single blanket each. Get some sleep, Zachary said as they finished a meager breakfast of jerky and water. I'll keep watch. Too exhausted to argue, Willow wrapped herself in her blanket and closed her eyes. Despite her fatigue, sleep was elusive. Every sound made her tense, expecting Holloway's men to descend upon them at any moment. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were troubled images of the branding iron, of Holloway's sneering face, of running through endless desert with no destination in sight. She woke with a start to find Zachary kneeling beside her, concern etched on his features. Bad dreams? He asked quietly. Willow nodded, sitting up. The sun was high now. She had slept longer than intended. You should have woken me sooner, she said, ashamed of her weakness. You needed the rest. Zachary handed her the canteen. Besides, I'm used to keeping watch. Have you seen any sign of pursuit? Nothing yet. But that doesn't mean they're not looking. They continued their journey after a brief meal, Zachary setting a pace that was urgent but not panicked. The landscape was changing, becoming more forested as they moved northward. By late afternoon, they came upon a proper road, wide enough for wagons. The main route to Redemption, Zachary explained. We'll follow it, but stay within the tree line. Less chance of being spotted. As dusk approached, they saw smoke rising in the distance, a town or settlement of some kind. Zachary steered them away from it, finding another secluded spot to make camp for the night. This time, Willow insisted on taking her turn at watch, allowing Zachary to get some much-needed rest. Sitting alone in the quiet darkness, her revolver across her knees, she found herself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. A month ago, she had been a slave in all but name, bound to Holloway's ranch by fear and lack of options. Now she was free, riding toward a future she could shape for herself. All because one man had looked at her and seen a human being, not property. Her gaze drifted to Zachary's sleeping form. In the short time she had known him, he had become the most important person in her life, her rescuer, her teacher, her friend. And something more, something she was only beginning to acknowledge to herself. The night passed without incident, and they set out again at first light. According to Zachary, redemption was still 3 days' ride away at their current pace. "What will we do when we get there?" Willow asked as they rode. "Start over as Mr. and Mrs. Xavier?" Zachary was quiet for a moment. "If that's what you want. Is it what you want?" He glanced at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "I want you to be safe, to be free to choose your own path, even if that path leads away from you." The question was bold, more direct than Willow had intended, but it had been hovering between them for days, unspoken but ever present. Zachary reined in his horse, turning to face her fully. "Especially then," he said quietly. "I didn't help you escape one form of bondage just to trap you in another. And if I chose to stay?" Willow asked, her heart racing. "Not out of obligation or gratitude, but because I wanted to?" Something sparked in Zachary's eyes, hope, perhaps. But before he could respond, the sound of approaching horses broke the moment. They both tensed, hands moving to their weapons. "Get into the trees," Zachary ordered, already guiding his horse off the trail. They concealed themselves within the dense forest, watching as a group of riders came into view, not Holloway's men, but a family in a wagon, accompanied by 2 outriders. They passed without incident, unaware of the 2 fugitives watching from the shadows. When they were gone, Willow released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was close." "Too close," Zachary agreed. "We need to be more careful." They continued on, keeping well away from the road, speaking little. The moment of openness between them had passed, replaced by the practical concerns of survival. But Willow found herself returning to Zachary's words, to the look in his eyes before they were interrupted. By nightfall, they had made good progress, though the terrain had slowed them somewhat. They made camp in a small clearing, allowing themselves the luxury of a small, carefully banked fire for warmth. As they sat side by side, watching the flames, Willow found the courage to return to their earlier conversation. "You never answered my question," she said softly, "about what would happen if I chose to stay." Zachary was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but steady. "I've been alone most of my life. After the war, after losing my family, I convinced myself that was how it had to be, that attachments were dangerous." He looked at her then, his expression open, vulnerable. "And then I met you." Willow's breath caught in her throat. And everything changed." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and took her hand in his. "I don't want to be alone anymore, Willow. But more than that, I don't want you to feel obligated to stay with me because of what happened." "It's not obligation," Willow said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's something else entirely." Zachary's eyes searched hers, looking for confirmation of what she was saying. Willow held his gaze, letting him see the truth she was only now fully acknowledging to herself. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to stop him, Zachary leaned forward. His lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it made her heart ache. Willow closed her eyes, savoring the tenderness of the moment, the feeling of finally coming home after a long journey. When they parted, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I think I've been falling in love with you since the moment I saw you," he admitted. "Even then, in the worst circumstances, your strength shone through." "I was terrified," Willow confessed. "I still am, sometimes. That's what courage is. Being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "You're the bravest person I know, Willow Reed." She leaned into his touch, allowing herself to believe, truly believe, that this man saw her for who she was, not for the brand on her shoulder or the color of her skin or the circumstances of her birth, but for her heart, her mind, her soul. "I love you," she whispered, the words new and powerful on her tongue. I didn't know it could happen this way, this fast. But I do. Zachary's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Then we'll face whatever comes together. They slept that night wrapped in each other's arms, finding comfort and warmth despite the uncertainty that still surrounded them. For the first time since fleeing the Circle M, Willow slept without nightmares, protected by the steady beat of Zachary's heart beneath her cheek. Morning brought a renewed sense of purpose. They set out with determination, their destination no longer just a place of safety, but the beginning of a shared future. As they rode, Zachary told her more about Redemption, a growing town with opportunities for those willing to work hard, a place where a person's past mattered less than what they could contribute to the community. We could build something there, he said. Together, if that's what you want. It is, Willow replied without hesitation. Very much. Their journey continued for 2 more days, uneventful, but for a brief encounter with a trapper who shared news from the south. According to him, there was talk of a rancher offering a substantial reward for information about a runaway woman and the man who helped her escape. Holloway's still searching, Zachary said grimly after the trapper had gone. But we're getting beyond his usual territory. Redemption should be safe. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, they crested a hill and saw it Redemption, spread out in a valley below. It was larger than Willow had expected, with proper streets, substantial buildings, even a church steeple rising above the surrounding structures. What do you think? Zachary asked, watching her face. It's beautiful, Willow said honestly. It looks like possibility. They rode into town as the sun was setting, drawing curious but not unfriendly glances from people on the streets. Zachary led them to a modest hotel, where he secured a room for the night. Tomorrow we'll look for more permanent lodgings, he said as they settled into their room. And work. What kind of work will you seek? Willow asked. Whatever's available. I have skills with horses, cattle, can build things. What about you? Willow thought about Mrs. Thornton's suggestion at the festival. Maybe teaching. If they need someone to help with children. Zachary smiled. You'd be good at that. They spent their first night in Redemption planning, dreaming, allowing themselves to believe in a future where they weren't running, where they could build something lasting. The next morning, they set out to explore the town, to begin making their vision a reality. Redemption proved to be everything they had hoped for, a bustling, growing community with opportunities for those willing to work hard. Within a week, Zachary had secured a position at the town's livery stable, while Willow, to her delight, was welcomed as an assistant at the schoolhouse. They found a small cabin to rent on the edge of town, simple but clean, with a view of the mountains to the north. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, the first real home either of them had known in years. As weeks passed, they settled into a routine, becoming part of the fabric of Redemption. Zachary's quiet competence earned him respect at the livery, while Willow discovered a natural talent for teaching, her patience and kindness winning over even the most reluctant students. They were careful at first, maintaining the fiction that they were already married, though no formal ceremony had ever taken place. But as they became more established in the community, the lie began to weigh on them both. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their cabin watching the sunset, Zachary took Willow's hand. I've been thinking, he said, about us, about our situation. Willow looked at him, a question in her eyes. We've been living as husband and wife, he continued. But it's been a pretense, something we did out of necessity. Yes, Willow agreed cautiously. I don't want it to be a pretense anymore. Zachary's eyes met hers, earnest and unwavering. I want it to be real. If you'll have me. Willow's heart soared at his words, though a shadow of doubt crossed her mind. Are you sure? There are those who would look down on you for marrying someone like me. Let them look down, Zachary said firmly. Their opinions mean nothing to me. What matters is how I feel about you, how you feel about me. And how do you feel? Willow asked softly, though she already knew the answer. I love you, Willow Reed. More than I ever thought possible. I want to build a life with you, a real life, not one based on lies or fear. Tears welled in Willow's eyes, tears of joy, of relief, of love so deep it threatened to overwhelm her. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you, Zachary Xavier. The ceremony took place 2 weeks later in Redemption's small church. It was a simple affair, attended by the friends they had made in their new community, the schoolmaster and his wife, Zachary's employer from the livery, neighbors who had welcomed them without question. As they spoke their vows, Willow felt a sense of rightness, of completion. This was what freedom truly meant: the ability to choose one's own path, to love openly, to build a future based on hope rather than fear. After the ceremony, they returned to their cabin, now truly their home, shared in every sense. As night fell, they stood together on the porch, looking out at the stars that had guided them on their journey. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked, his arms around her waist. Willow leaned back against him, savoring his warmth, his steadiness. "I'm thinking about how far we've come, about how impossible this all would have seemed not so long ago. And now it feels like the most natural thing in the world." She turned in his arms to face him. "Being here, with you." Zachary's hand came up to gently trace the line of her jaw. "Do you ever think about Holloway? About what happened?" Willow considered the question. The brand on her shoulder had healed into a scar, still visible, still a reminder, but no longer painful to the touch. Like the memory of her time at the Circle M, it had become a part of her story, but not the whole of it. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but it doesn't haunt me like it once did. It's in the past." "And the future?" Willow smiled, a full, unguarded smile that reflected the joy in her heart. "The future is ours to write. Together." Their lips met in a kiss that held all the promise of that future, a future built on love, respect, and the freedom they had fought so hard to secure. 6 months later, word reached Redemption that Marcus Holloway had been killed in a dispute over gambling debts. The news brought Willow a complex mix of emotions: relief that the threat was finally, truly over, but also a strange sort of pity for a man whose life had been consumed by cruelty and ownership. "Are you all right?" Zachary asked when she shared the news. "Yes," Willow said, and meant it. "It's truly over now. We can stop looking over our shoulders." With the shadow of Holloway lifted, they embraced their new life with renewed vigor. Zachary eventually saved enough to buy into the livery as a partner, while Willow continued teaching, taking particular interest in children who, like her, came from difficult circumstances. They made their cabin into a true home, adding a small garden where Willow grew vegetables and flowers, expanding the porch where they spent summer evenings watching the sunset. And in time, they welcomed a daughter, Eva, named for Zachary's mother, a child born into freedom who would never know the pain her parents had endured. As Willow watched her husband holding their infant daughter, his expression one of wonder and love, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. From the brutal moment of the branding to this peaceful domestic scene, a distance measured not just in miles, but in courage, in determination, in the unwavering belief that even in the harshest circumstances, love could take root and flourish. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked, looking up to find her watching them. "About how sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best," Willow replied. "If you hadn't seen what Holloway was doing that day." "But I did," Zachary said simply, "and I'll never regret stepping in." Willow crossed the room to join them, placing her hand on her daughter's soft head, her other hand finding Zachary's. "Neither will I." In the years that followed, Redemption continued to grow, and with it, the Xavier family prospered. Zachary eventually built the ranch he had once dreamed of, a modest spread outside town where they raised horses and a few cattle. Willow opened a small school specifically for children who might otherwise miss out on education: former slaves, orphans, the children of immigrants. And always, they kept their door open to those in need, particularly those seeking freedom from situations like the one Willow had escaped. Their home became known as a safe haven, a place where people could find not just shelter, but understanding and support. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Zachary surprised Willow with a special gift: a silver pendant, beautifully crafted, in the shape of a circle with a line through it. "What does it mean?" she asked as he fastened it around her neck. "It means not property," he explained. "A reminder of how we began, of what we overcame." Tears filled Willow's eyes as she touched the pendant. "It's perfect." That night, as they sat on their porch watching the stars come out, their children asleep inside, Willow reflected on how completely her life had transformed. The brand on her shoulder remained, a permanent mark of what she had endured, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it served as a reminder of her journey, of her resilience, and of the love that had helped her reclaim her freedom and her identity. "You know," she said, leaning against Zachary's shoulder, "sometimes I think about that day at the Circle M. About how different everything would have been if you hadn't been there." Zachary's arm tightened around her. "I was meant to be there, just like you were meant to be here, with me." "Do you believe that? That things happen for a reason?" "I believe that good people can make good things out of bad situations," he replied thoughtfully. "That courage and kindness matter more than circumstances. That love is stronger than ownership." Willow nodded, understanding what he meant. They had taken the worst moment of her life and transformed it into the beginning of something beautiful. Not by forgetting or denying what had happened, but by choosing to move forward together, to build something new from the ashes of the past. As the stars continued to emerge, painting the night sky with their ancient light, Willow Xavier, once branded as property, now a wife, a mother, a teacher, a free woman in every sense, looked up with gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the man beside her who had seen her humanity when others saw only a possession, and for the future that stretched before them, boundless with possibility. "I love you," she whispered, the words as true now as they had been when she first spoke them all those years ago. "And I love you," Zachary replied, his voice a promise kept. "Always have, always will." In that moment, under the vast New Mexico sky, Willow knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, not property, but a person. Not owned, but cherished. Not a victim, but a survivor who had found not just freedom, but joy. And that, she thought as she rested her head on her husband's shoulder, was the greatest victory of all.